Hey everybody, what's going on? Hexlex here. I got another Master Duel video for you. So this time we're coming to Tearlaments. I have not been playing Tearlaments too much at all this season. Definitely been mostly busy with sprites and reveling in sprite sprint in general. Although we do actually get to do that here in this deck as well. And we're actually going to see the application of sprint, I believe, in at least one of these games coming up here, here in Tearlaments. But yeah, I wanted to come back to the deck just to see how I felt about it in its current state before it got a slight hit on the next upcoming ban list, although I do think that it is going to be a lot more impactful than a lot of people realize. That's going to be Sulliek. Sulliek is going to be going to one copy. And I've talked about this a little bit on the channel already, mostly in our ban list discussion video, but as far as Sulliek going to one, there are some people who are kind of saying like, oh, what kind of a hit is that? It's not that great, like, you know, it's just the trap card, they should be hitting diffusers, and I do think that Havnis like could go to one, maybe Scheiren as well, but Sulliek going to one is a lot bigger of a deal than it might initially seem. This card is not only a good disruption tool, but also a very important consistency tool for Tearlaments. For example, the Foolish Burial Goods definitely gets a lot more dicey with the Sulliek going to one, because if you use Foolish Burial Goods to send the Sulliek, you do get the monster search, but then you don't really have a way to set up the Sulliek later because you've, well, sent your only copy. You can try to use Heartbeat, I guess, to get it back, but that's really very situational and not very reliable at all. The other problem is, of course, if you draw Sulliek at any point, then your Foolish Burial Goods just does not really do much of anything anymore because you don't really have a good target to be searching. I mean, you could still send a Scream out of, like, the Cryme, but, like, that's pretty much all you can do with the goods at that point, because again, you would have already drawn your one of Sulliek. So I do think that this will be a hit to not only Tear's ability to disrupt, but also their consistency. I think it's a good hit, a lot better of a one than it might seem on the surface there. I have changed up the build slightly here. I mostly cut down on Baldrakes, and I put in a couple of Imperms here. We're still playing Super Poly. I don't remember if I was playing 2 or 3 before, but I'm definitely playing 3 now. This card's actually fantastic in a deck that can support it, which Tearlaments very much can now. You know, in the past, I have said that Super Poly was not good in Tearlaments, but that's mostly because we didn't have access to Garura Wings of Restorant Life yet. Super Poly was a lot more situational when the only thing you could summon by using 2 cards on your opponent's field was the Mudragon in the swamp. But now, with the Garura and the Mudragon, Super Poly, it's very hard for Super Poly to not be live against your opponent. So, in that regard, it ends up being extremely good, and I'm definitely playing 3 copies. I'm definitely really liking it a lot too. The 3 Super Poly. It's good going first because you can set it and use it as a disrupt. It's good going second because you can use it as a board breaker. And I really value these cards that are good first or second over stuff like that's only good going first or second in particular. Mostly going second cards. Of course, I had a whole video about how much I dislike stuff like evenly matched going second cards, but I digress. So still have the Foolish Burial. I've been a little bit borderline about this because a lot of times it's either unnecessary or doesn't do enough, but at the same time, it is still important to have that consistency. I think moving forward, when Sulliek goes to 1, we definitely play Foolish Burial over like Foolish Burial Goods. Even though it's not as consistent, you know, it'll be more consistent post-ban list because, again, with the 1 Sulliek and also the 1 Goods, this limit also, in hindsight, is now very unnecessary with Sulliek going to 1. It just kind of occurred to me, like, hopefully we see Goods go back up to, like, 2 or 3 in some upcoming ban lists, but that's a discussion for another time. Yeah, I think that it pretty much covers it. I did have one extra deck change. I took out the ranks, oh my god, hang on, it's like Drudge something. Yes, I remembered it. Waldo, founder of the Drudge Dragons. We were playing this, and I did actually have one game where I popped off with this card, but other than that, I never really summoned it, so I decided to just throw an Underworld Goddess in here just in case I needed it. Better to have it not needed than need it not have it, as I always like to say, so yeah, that pretty much covers it. And I think we can go ahead and break the list down now before taking a look at some gameplay. So, this deck we are on 3 Maxx, 2 Tearlaments Merrli, 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, 2 Tearlaments Havnis, 1 Fairy Tale Snow, 2 Tearlaments Scheiren, 3 Tearlaments Reinoheart, 1 Keldo the Sacred Protector, 1 Mudora the Sword Oracle, 2 Kelbek the Ancient Vanguard, 1 Agido the Ancient Sentinel, 1 Bystial Magnamhut, 1 Bystial Druiswarm, 1 Bystial Baldrake, 1 Foolish Burial, 1 Reinforcement of the Army, 1 Foolish Burial Goods, 1 Primeval Planet's Perlerino, 3 Tearlaments Scream, 3 Super Poly, 1 Tearlaments Heartbeat, 2 Infinite Impermanence, 1 Tearlaments Cryme, and then 2 Tearlaments Sulliek. There's our main deck. For the extra deck, we're on 1 Mudragon the Swamp, 1 Tearlaments Kitkallos, 1 Garura, Wings of Restorant Life, 1 Predaplant Dragostapelia, 1 Tearlaments Rulkallos, 1 Tearlaments Kaliedo-Heart, 1 Abyss Dweller, 1 number 41 Bagooska, the terribly tired Tapier, 1 Time Thief Redoer, 1 Beatrice, Lady of the Eternal, 1 Divine Arsenal, AA-ZEUS, Sky Thunder, 1 Dark the Dark Charmer Gloomy, 1 Sprite Elf, 1 Sprite Sprint, and then 1 Underworld Goddess of the Closed World. That's going to round out our list. Now let's look at some gameplay. Alright, we have a somewhat of a tier mirror match for our first duel, but our opponent's actually on not only branded stuff, but also Shaddolls with their tiers, and they're playing 40 cards, which is kind of wild to me. They managed to cram everything into 40 cards there, but we're going to be taking the second turn. Our hand's not looking too terrible here. We do have the Super Poly and the Ash Blossom. Opponent's going to start by normal summoning Merrli. I'm going to chain Ash Blossom to that. It might seem like a bit of a weak effect to use the Ash Blossom on, but if your Tearlament opponent is starting by normal summoning Merrli, that means their hand is not good, because this is definitely like the worst, not the worst, but one of the worst normal summons you can make to try to actually start your plays. So I'm going to go ahead and use the Ash Blossom on this Merrli, with the assumption that my opponent's going to very shortly end their turn afterward. The Ash Blossom resolves, negating the Merrli, and sure enough, my opponent's going to set a card before passing. I do want to be cautious in this background. I'm going to pretty much play assuming it's Sulliek, which is also what we top decked here. I'm going to activate Scream by activating it, and then normal summon the Scheiren to mill 3. I don't know why I said by there. I didn't get much in the way of mills. I'm going to grab my other Sulliek, because it's my only other target for this other Scream here. Battle over the Merrli, set 3 cards, and then pass over to my opponent. So we actually have a pretty rare game where it's a tier mirror match, but both players are bricked. Opponent normal summons a second Merrli, going to trigger my Scream and also Sulliek to negate their Merrli here. Thankfully, my opponent's back row isn't also Sulliek. They could have chained that and then negated my Scheiren by sending their Merrli. So our mills here are pretty good. We actually did manage to hit the Merrli as well as a Keldo, and that's going to get my opponent to then shortly afterward concede there. So pretty quick game for that first one, but yeah, I just thought that was a funny duel where it's like, this never happens with Tearlaments. It feels like where like not just one, but both players just have like very bricked hands, and yeah, we managed to still play through it regardless. Making use of our Sulliek there against our opponent's Merrli, I think, was crucial. Just negating their Merrlis in general. I think some people might see a normal summon Merrli and be like, it's only a mill 3. I'll save the Ash Blossom / Sulliek for a bigger effect. But again, if your opponent is just normal summoning Merrli, they probably don't have like a spectacular hand. So I do think in that regard, it can be very good to use Disruption against a seemingly weak effect. It's all about timing, really, and just trying to read how good the opponent's hand is. But let's get to it for our first game. Let's go for our next one here. Alright, this one's definitely going to be more of a back and forth here. We're up against Stun, and this is going to be a 9-turn game, so you can already probably guess about how it's going to go. But we do get to go first, which is very nice, especially playing against Stun. One of my, I think I already talked about this. I was just going to say one of my losses when I was trying to rank up to Diamond 5. This is not with this deck, this is with Bystial Sprites. Or no, this is with Pure Sprite, actually, but I went second against Stun. My opponent was in Master of 5, and it's like so frustrating because it's like, you could just let me in. You could just let me. It's like that meme. Let me in. Let me in. But I digress. Yeah, I'm gonna be playing under Maxx, but that's totally fine for this deck because, as always, if you get Maxx as Tearlaments, you just go for Kitkallos, grab Sulliek, and then you can pass back over to your opponent. So here I'm going to give them one draw off the Maxx, again just going for the Kitkallos and the Sulliek, setting that with the Imperm and the Super Poly, and passing back to them. I'm going to then Maxx them on their draw phase for attempting to inflict maximum despair, but as we already discussed, the despair here is that we are actually playing against Stun. So they're going to fire off a Maxx, and then a Heartbeat Feather Duster. I'm going to let that resolve, because there's not really much I can do with any of the back row here. But I'm going to use the Sulliek to grab not a Havnis, but a Reinoheart here. It was a bit of a risky decision, I will say, but the reason I wanted to grab the Reinoheart here instead of the Havnis was that if my opponent, like, there's a lot of worlds where my opponent just clears without necessarily proccing the Havnis, and then I'm in trouble. I'd rather have the Reinoheart to try to have plays for the follow-up turn than have a disrupt that may or might not. Like, even if the Havnis activates, it might not hit anything, right? So I'd rather have a sure play for the next turn than a maybe play for this turn. Opponent's going to special the Dogmatica Ecclesia, grabbing a Dogmatica Punishment, setting that and a monster before passing. So at this point, I didn't actually know I was playing against them. I thought I was actually playing against Dogmatica. I don't think they actually use these. I don't know anything about Dogmatica, so maybe they do use Ecclesia and Punishment. But yeah, it was definitely an interesting choice here. The Ecclesia notably can't be destroyed by battle with any monsters summoned from the extra deck, so we will have to play being mindful of that. Alright, here I'm going to use my Reinoheart to go for a Kaliedo-Heart, and I'm going to use that to actually out the Dogmatica Ecclesia here. Opponent's going to then use their Punishment on the Kitkallos. That's 100% fine, because that just means I get mills. That's the other thing here, too, right? We have to play assuming they're going to use the Punishment to send the Norden, or the, not Norden, the Natis. What, Norden? No, that's the banned one, isn't it? Natis in order to blow up my other monster here. So they do just that, but thankfully, you know, Kaliedo-Heart brings itself back. And again, the Kitkallos is going to mill 5, so definitely an ideal way to play into this here. So at this point, my opponent's only got a set monster and 2 cards in hand. I'm not, like, really particularly scared here. Gonna use the Havnis effect, or use the Kaliedo-Heart effect, rather, to send the Scheiren, and then I'll summon a Mudragon in the swamp here to give myself some targeting protection options, as well as summoning the Druiswarm. I'm going to try to push for lethal here, but Fossilina! Ooh, Fossilina is my opponent's back row. That gets to wipe out my whole board. Thankfully, I do get the Rulkallos back, due to the way that it works, because the Fossilina is no longer on the field, even though the animation, you know, shows it on the field. It's actually technically not, so opponent's going to then use Necrovalley Throne to add a Commandant, and at this point I realize, like, oh no, they're just on stun. Like, it's not any kind of Dogmatica anything, it's just stun, utilizing a small Dogmatica package. So, utilizing a small Gravekeeper package here as well, using the Throne for the Necrovalley, and they even have the Royal Tribute as well, to force me to send, what was that last monster in my hand? The Mudora. Alright, gonna battle over this Inspector border. Thankfully, my opponent's back row wasn't Mirror Force. Passing, gonna keep the Scream in hand just in case I draw like a Super Poly or something and need it. Opponent sets a monster before passing. This is definitely where we are in beatdown mode. Gonna normal summon this Reinoheart. Opponent's going to Solemn Judgment to negate it, paying 2,000 life points. I do think that was actually a bit of a misplay though, because I'm gonna battle here, and actually, here's the thing, right? If my opponent had not used the Solemn Judgment, I would have battled with the Reinoheart and not been able to battle over it. Then Rulkallos would have battled over. They still would have been at 4,000. Although, to be fair, at that point, I still have the Reinoheart in the field, so I still represent lethal with what I have on board. So actually, I think that was the right play to Solemn Judgment. But now my opponent's in top deck mode. They are going to top deck a set card and pass back to me. Again, that could very easily be an actual Mirror Force, but I'm still gonna have to battle into it anyway, attacking for lethal, which thankfully does connect. So yeah, you know, I will say that if you're gonna be playing stun, at least my opponent played some interesting packages in it. The Dogmatica package for a couple of pops, as well as the Ecclesia not being able to be destroyed by battle was actually very relevant there. I really needed something that would not only let me remove it, but also survive the punishment plus the Natis wipe, which is what I did with the Kaliedo-Heart there. But that, and also the Necrovalley package, again, if you're going to be playing stun, at least my opponent is doing something a little bit interesting with it there, so not too shabby. Let's go ahead and go into our next duel. Alright, this time we're playing against Sprite. Opponent's got a couple of interesting decks, including a single Rescue Cat, and they're not on, like, they're on Nimble Beavers and the 2 Melfi monsters, but that's it. So that's kind of interesting to be playing one single Rescue Cat, but we're going to be going second here. Not a terrible going second hand. We opened Imperm, Kelbek, and a Super Poly. Gonna start with the Imperm on the Nimble Beaver. I do like to use Ash Blossom / Imperm against the Nimble Beaver if my Sprite opponent starts by normal summoning that, because, like, There are some times where they just don't open any Sprite monsters, and that's just the end of their turn, but unfortunately for me here, they actually had Jet and Carrot in addition to the Nimble Beaver, so this is very much not going to be the end of their turn. Sprint is going to activate sending the Angler. Angler F is, of course, going to be sending a couple of Beavers. I'll activate the Kelbek here. My opponent's got a Maxx to draw a card, but that's actually fine because this is the only special summon I'm going to do this turn, and now they don't have the card draw, or the Maxx rather, for my turn. So they do still, of course, get the Nimble Beavers. But without the Sprint, their Gigantic is smaller, and they also have one less material to work with in general, so I do still think it was worth it to summon the Kelbek here. This also gives me the potential to set up for a Zeus play on my turn. My opponent's got the Sprite Blue coming down off of the starter, and then they grab the Swap Frog off of the Gigantic, so now the Elf is going to come down and, I assume, bring back the Swap Frog. Yep, here it is. Swap F will send another copy of itself, linking these two off for the IP Masquerena. And let's see if they... I think they do go for the Melfi line here as well. Yep. Here's the Ronin coming back. Oh no, we don't go for the Melfi line. Ah, we just hard opened the Caddy. That's what it was. We're just the luckiest player in the world. That's all good. Alright, I'm gonna... Okay, so here's the thing, right? That sequence looked really weird, but what happened was... Oh, I turned the Kelbek to attack mode, and then went to enter my battle phase. I wanted to proc the IP Masquerena and get it to activate, but even if they didn't activate it, that's obviously fine, because then I use Kelbek to battle over IP, and then Super Poly. But what I'm doing here is I'm forcing the IP, and then using Super Poly in response, pitching the Sulliek. I want to get their Elf off the field, so that way they can't make the Avermax with the IP. Which would definitely be pretty much the end of the game for me right there. So, gonna use Red and Elf to go for the Garura. That also forces them to go for a different monster with the IP. Unfortunately, that different monster is gonna be the second Elf, which can activate here, in addition to the Caddy. So they are going to get back, not the red, surprisingly enough, but actually the Sprite Blue. I thought they were going to go for a red for a monster negate here, but I guess they figured the Carrot plus the Penny plus whatever their back row is going to be enough. That kind of makes me wonder if their back row is an Imperm. So I'm kind of going to play assuming that, but it could also be any number of things, right? It could be Double Cross, it could be Smashers, it could be Called By, it could be Cross Out. Yeah, with Sprite in particular, there's like no shortage of things it could be. Who's going to add a Pixies here? I'm going to move to battle phase, battle over their Herald, and I am actually going to battle into this Elf, even though it will get them to use their Pixies, because I actually value the card draw here. I can't battle over the Carrot anyway. I'd love to have gotten rid of that, but here I'm going to activate the Scream and then normal summon Merrli. I'm actually going to chain block the other way around, so that way they can't Carrot to negate the Scream's 3 mills. Normally I would chain block the Merrli with the Scream, but here I'm going to do it the other way around. Unfortunately for me, I just did not mill anything relevant here, so despite that, I still get to link away for Sprite Sprint and use Sprint to send a Merrli. This is what I was talking about during the deck profile, how Sprite Sprint can be used to set up some tier 1 plays. Unfortunately, it did end up being a call by that was in my opponent's back row there. So, yeah, they get to banish the Merrli, and then, yeah, that's going to negate it. Force me to set a Sulliek and then pass. Things definitely are not looking good here. Going to fire off a Maxx in the drop phase to try to do something, but my opponent actually just top-decked Ash Blossom, so that's going to be a concede from me there. So that was rough, but to be fair, our opponent did have like the ideal Sprite opening, and it really did come down to two factors. One was that we whiffed on the mill 6, and two was that our opponent had a call by for the Merrli there. We're not for, well, I guess to be fair, well, no, yeah, even if the mill 6 had hit something, my opponent would have used call by then I could have used Sprint to link, send the Merrli, and then activate. So, yeah, I think it was just for, if not for either one of those factors, either whiffing or the call by, we definitely could have played out of that. But we do still have one more duel to watch, so let's go straight into it here. And our final opponent is going to be Sprite yet again. More interesting text from this opponent. This one's on Ibli. The one that you summon to your opponent's board and they can't special except for link summoning. So definitely would have been annoying to get hit by that, but I don't think I did actually get hit by it during this duel. Opponent's going to go first, but thankfully we have Imperm and Havnis here. So they normal the Maxi and special the Carrot, going for the Gigantic Sprite. Now the sequencing here is actually going to be really important. Gigantic Sprite's going to activate its effect. I'm going to chain Havnis, and then I'm going to chain the Imperm. This will not only allow me to summon the Havnis, and then get my mills, of course, but now I also get to negate the Gigantic Sprite effect. If I had used Imperm first, then I wouldn't have had a chance to activate Havnis, because Havnis has to be activated directly in response to the monster effect activating. So you do want to make sure that you're activating it in that order. Alright, here's Imperm negating the Gigantic Sprite, and then specialing the Havnis. Havnis milled Kelbek among a couple other cards, mainly just the Kelbek there. I will fire off the Kelbek, knowing my opponent is on Tearlaments, or not on Tearlaments rather, but they have the Ash Blossom for it, which I think was actually a misplay for my opponent's part. If they had the Ash Blossom, they should have just used it on my Havnis. I still could have Impermed, to be fair, and negated the Gigantic Sprite, but it would have been very easy for me to have hit, like, oh, not very easy, but, you know, I could have hit Kelbek plus a Fuser, right? Like, it's so possible for me to hit something that they can't Ash Blossom that, I don't know. I just think you should not give your opponent the opportunity at all to even drop the Havnis on the field and mill, but well, that's just my 2 cents. Well, it's going to set a card before passing back over to us, drawing an Ash Blossom ourselves for turn here. I'm actually going to start by normal summoning the Merrli and just see what I get here. Even if I don't hit anything, I still have this Foolish Burial, but I did actually manage to hit I think Havnis and Scheiren there, so I'll only activate the Havnis there. Don't want to activate both because that would force me to fuse away the Kitkallos before I have a chance to search with her. Don't get to search with her anyway because my opponent has an Imperm, but that's going to be fine. Once again, we get to show off the power of Sprint here. Going to link away my Havnis and Merrli for the Sprint. Sprint F to send the Merrli. Merrli F is going to activate, allowing me to fuse with the Kitkallos in order to make the Rulkallos. Now here I was debating how to use this Foolish Burial, but as soon as I summoned the Rulkallos, my opponent conceded. Foolish Burial could have been used to send a Fuser directly, or I could have sent an Agido. The problem with sending an Agido actually is that there's a chance that my opponent ends up milling a Nimble Angler and then being able to summon multiple Beavers from the deck. I could negate the effect with the Rulkallos, but it's like, it's so unnecessary. Basically, I was just trying to figure out how to lethal there, but as soon as my Rulkallos came down, my opponent pretty much just conceded anyway, so my opponent just found the lethal for me. But that's going to go ahead and do it for these games. Let's move now to our outro. Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching all the way to the very end of the video like this. That means a whole lot to me. Not just personally, but it's also a great way of supporting the channel as well. If you're interested in supporting the channel in other means, you can of course feel free to comment and or subscribe right here on YouTube. I'm always looking to the comments section. You guys leave some pretty awesome feedback as far as like constructive criticism goes when it comes to deck building, gameplay, channel content, all that stuff. So feel free to leave your opinion down there. I will be sure to take a look at that there. And then subscribing is going to be the best way to get notifications of when these videos drop. That does happen every day, by the way, so if you're looking for daily Master Duel content, you've come to the right place. And there are more places where you can get some daily Master Duel content. If you check out the description below, follow the top link over to my Patreon page. There for just $5 a month, which is as much as you pay for a booster pack. You'll find a lot more value than a pack full of filler over there. We've got some previews for content upcoming here on the channel. We've got some exclusive games that are only posted over on Patreon over there. We've got some Q&As, and then you can also have your name featured in this lovely credit sequence where I thank all of the people who are helping contribute over there on Patreon. It's a huge support to the channel, and it really means a lot as well. So thank you everyone who is donating that is featured here on screen. And again, you know, it's not just a pure donation. You do get some more daily Master Duel content over there just for being a part of the Patreon. But I think that's about all the time that I have for today's video. Once again, I just want to thank you so very much for sticking all the way to the end of the video. Again, it just means a lot as I do put a decent amount of work into getting these videos out every single day. But that's about all the time that I've got for now. So without further ado, this is XLex. I'm signing out, and I hope you have a fantastic day.